Hello and welcome to HR Talk, People Management's regular discussion about topics making the news in the HR world. I'm Michelle Stevens, and this week we'll be talking about the CIPD's Absence Management Survey conducted in partnership with Simplyhealth. I'm joined by Dr. Jill Miller from the CIPD and Kelly Morris from Simplyhealth to discuss the research findings. The survey shows that stress-related absence is on the rise and is a growing cause of long-term sickness absence. Jill, does the research suggest why this is?
Well, yes, it's a particularly worrying finding that stress is now the number one cause of long-term absence, and that's for both manual and non-manual employees. And across the board, 2/5 of organisations are saying they've seen an increase in stress-related absence over the past year. But in the public sector especially, this figure rises to 50%. And some of the main causes of stress that we found through our survey results are workload and management style. But in the public sector, what's particularly prominent as a cause of work-related stress is the amount of organisational change and restructuring that's happening at the moment, as well as the amount of uncertainty around job roles. And I think there's a lot that employers and HR especially can do to help this problem. And at the moment, only 58% of organisations saying they're actually taking steps to identify and manage stress at work.
So Kelly, what can employers do about this?
Well, I think as Jill was saying, I think trying to identify some of the causes of stress and actually communicating with their employees about how they're feeling is a good start. They need to be able to spot the early signs, I think, of people being under excessive pressure and those that are having difficulty coping at work, and talk to people, undertake stress audits, engage with their workforce, find out what's going on. I think it's also important as well that when someone is suffering from stress, that employees have ways of coping with it, have ways of offering support to their employees, and that could be things like EAPs, or it could be about communication of benefits that are available to help them.
Public sector absence has traditionally been higher than the private sector. What does the study tell us about how spending cuts are impacting on absence, and what trends are visible in the private sector also?
Well, our survey this year continues to show that gap between public and private sector absence, because overall absence figures are at 7.7 days per employee per year. In the private sector, this is slightly less at 7.1. In the public sector, this is noticeably more at 9.1 days per employee, so there is still that gap. If we look at each sector in turn, if we look at the public sector first, we have seen a decrease in their absence levels this year from last year, from 9.6 days down to 9.1. We have to be cautious, I think, when looking at any decrease in the public sector at the moment, because it's uncertain whether that is actually due to better absence management and the effects of that, or if it's down to the effects of presenteeism, so people coming to work ill because they're worried about their job roles. But if we look at the private sector, we've seen a slight increase in their absence levels from 6.6 days to 7.1. And I think sort of these relative increases and decreases do seem to reflect the relative fortunes between the two sectors. Kelly?
Yeah, and I think, clearly the public and private sector, they're all going through lots of change at the moment in this sort of economic downturn, which is unavoidable. And I think employees need to start to think more about how they communicate change, because I think a lot of stress is associated with that unknown, what might be around the corner. And I think if organisations are more open about that could have a positive impact, particularly on stress and associated absence.
Where people are concerned about redundancy, is there evidence that presenteeism is a growing factor?
Well, yes. A quarter of organisations in our who have responded to our survey have said that they've noticed an increase in people coming to work ill, and I think this is related to job insecurity. And we've also found a link between presenteeism and redundancy. So organisations that say that they're expecting to make redundancies in the next 6 months have also said that they've noticed an increase in the number of people coming to work ill. And I think presenteeism is something that's really important to address. Not only because when people come to work ill, they transmit the illness to their colleagues, but also it takes longer for people to recover if they're still coming to work while they're trying to recover at the same time.
So, Kelly, what can HR professionals do about a culture of presenteeism when it is so less visible and measurable than absence?
I think this is a really hard job for employers, because everyone has, particularly in the private sector and indeed in the public sector, targets around absenteeism, and it's very difficult, I think, for employers to, to be seen to be encouraging to send people home, because it sort of goes in the face of what they're trying to achieve or what they may be targeted on trying to deliver. But I think businesses need to recognise the dangers of presenteeism, and as Jill's highlighted, the impact that it has on colleagues, but productivity as well, and I think biting the bullet that a couple of days at home sort of resting is actually more beneficial than being in work and ill in the long term.
Yeah. So with budgets being tight, do you feel health and well-being is slipping down the agenda, or is it enjoying greater focus, Kelly?
I think the picture's quite mixed, actually. I think there's some organisations that pay lip service to health and well-being. They believe it's an area that they cut during these recession times. I think the more informed organisations recognise that that they're really risking long-term business performance by not investing in health and well-being. But it's very difficult, I think, to get it on the the senior level agenda, the boardroom agenda, to recognise the benefits that a well executed and thought out health and well-being strategy has on business performance.
Jill, Kelly, thank you for joining me today. That's all for this week, but keep up to date with the latest HR news at our website, peoplemanagement.co.uk. Until next time, take care.